This podcast is brought to you by the International Coaching Federation. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the ICF credential coach who recorded it and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the ICF.
Hello to my ICF friends. Good to see you here. Thank you for coming and listening. So if you would like mind-blowing changes with yourself or your clients, you might want to dive in with a big splash into the metaphorical deep end. This is where the magic happens. I am Christi, and I'm a PCC coach with the ICF and heading hopefully quickly soon to my MCC. It's been a really fun journey. And today I want to talk about some fun stuff having to do with metaphor and getting some specific skill around it, which I think will be really helpful for you. So I want to talk about metaphor as hand and body gestures, first of all, and then I want to talk about metaphors with the language of relationships, and then we'll talk about metaphor, I guess like the symbol of metaphor, the metaphors that maybe we're more used to listening for a little bit. So metaphor is everywhere. When you start recognizing how often it's used, you just can't stop seeing it. You'll hear it metaphorically embedded into nearly every sentence that's said. And so what often happens with coaching is that we forget how powerful the metaphorical world is and just how much it links that concrete real life experience to the vast morass of unconscious that's going on underneath. And so sometimes what coaches do is they mistakenly use other words or interpretations about metaphors rather than sticking with the exact imagery and feeling and smells and sensations that are part of the client's internal experience. And so what I want to do today is help us to get more just closer to using the client's reference points so that we can help them to build awareness. And so we're looking mainly at the ICF core competency of building that awareness, bringing the unconscious, subconscious, unknown to a more physical awareness that can be manipulated and changed for really long-lasting effects for our clients. So starting out with the hand and body, you might have heard when I first started speaking that I talked about the mind blown. And even though you can't see me, what I did is I put all of my fingertips to my temples and then blasted my fingertips out straight as I said the words mind blown. And I think that's a pretty common gesture that some people make in some cultures. And we also talked about diving into the deep end. And while I did that, I actually moved my body, kind of making a gesture of diving. So for me, it was kind of a full-on experience to be using that metaphorical language. And our clients use their bodies and their gestures quite a lot. For example, I had a client who was talking about her relationship with God. And she was in tears and saying that she felt that she just didn't have a relationship with God. And she was using the word he when she talked about God. And her gesture was to kind of fling her left arm up and as far away as possible, almost like she was reaching for something up in the sky to her left. that she was never going to be able to reach because her arm was stretched out as far as it could go. And yet you could tell by the way she was looking up past her hand that God was much, much farther away than that. And so I asked her about it. I just said, hey, your hand is stretching out for something. Where else might God be? And so she looked down and searched inside for a little while. And the next thing I knew, she had placed both of her hands on her heart. And she said, God is in here. And it was fascinating to me what a huge shift that was for her. It's so simple. And yet the next time we spoke, she came instead of with a feeling of almost frantic. She had used the word untethered. She felt untethered by this disconnection with God. She came back saying that she was filled with gratitude and that she felt grounded. And so those are two very different metaphorical language words that went along with her gestures of reaching out to a faraway God versus touching this sensation of an inward experience with God. For another example with gestures, just a few days ago, I had a client who said that he was struggling with work taking up too much space. And as he said that, he put both of his hands straight in front of him, about shoulder width apart, and they were describing a space that literally just blocked his view. So it was about maybe not quite a meter wide and tall, but certainly as he described it with his hands stretched out in front of him, that was physically the space that work was taking up for him. And so I asked him to move his hands and to put work in its proper place. And so he used his hands to squeeze work down into a ball that was maybe half the size of his head. And so he was holding it in his two hands in this squeezed ball. And then he moved that ball down into the right, and it was outside of his line of vision. So it was more of a peripheral vision kind of thing, and quite a lot smaller. And so then I asked him, what does that open up in front of you? And suddenly he said, oh yeah, my girlfriend is really important to me. My parents are important to me. Sports. And so suddenly he had space in front of his face to see all of the other things that he wanted to be part of his life, now that work had been squeezed down and put in the place that he felt that it was meant to be at. So these are just a couple examples, but have fun with it. When you see a client expressing themselves and maybe they just go, and they use that gesture of two fists, or they say, I just feel like I'm shackled to my desk. And you see that they put their arms out as if they have handcuffs on. That's your opportunity to mirror their hand gestures, to take note of their hand gestures, to ask them how they want to move their body in a different way, which will also change their lived experience of their metaphor. So next, I want to talk a little bit about language that you can often hear in metaphor. And once again, this is about the coach matching the client's language. So when you think about someone saying that they want to think about something, some people might say that they want to think it through. Other people might think it over. Other Other people might mull it over. Somebody might want to get their mind around it. And so they have different relationships. They could be over it, under, through, around, about, in, out. There's all these relationship type words that they can be using, and these are metaphorical, and they have to do with size and shape and how I relate to whatever it is that I'm thinking about. And so if you hear those words, you can match them. You can ask questions about them. What might it be like to think something over instead of thinking something through? What if you lifted yourself above this problem? Or what if you looked at the dream that you have from the side instead of straight on? And so just building in different relationships and different perspectives to whatever it is that the client wants to talk about. Finally, I wanted us to just touch briefly, metaphorically touching, of course, just on the different senses that people use. There's this visual, there's spatial, there's gut feelings, there's I feel a knot in my chest, there's sometimes even olfactory. They could be smelling or tasting something. I can almost taste it. That's how badly I want it. And so letting yourself bring those things to life, and especially using the concept of clean language. And what I mean by clean language is that the coach brings in as few new words as possible into the conversation. And so if, for example, the client says, I want to be riding my own bike, you don't want to introduce different words. Like, you don't want to interpret that and say, oh, so you want to be standing on your own, or you want to take responsibility for yourself, or bring it, you're not trying to bring it back to more of a real life interpretation of it. I would invite you to stick with the metaphor longer, even if it feels a little awkward at first. Just let yourself play around with it. So if somebody says, I want to be riding my own bike, use their exact words and only add your words to help them define their relationship in time or space to the metaphor that they're using. So, for example, you could say, when you ride your own bike, what do you want? Or when you ride your own bike, then what happens? When you ride your own bike, where are you riding to? So you're using that exact words. You're not even saying, yeah, you could really take off and fly on that bike. You just use their words and add some questions about what happens next. What happened before you started riding the bike? What do you want from riding the bike? Where is the bike taking you? What happens next? And just play with it and see what happens. I would love to hear in the comments what happens when you start using really clean language, using the client's language, and allowing that metaphorical feelings and sounds and sights to leave the swamp of the unconscious and to come into an awareness that allows them to make choices. I'll leave you with one final example. I was coaching a guy who was a team lead, and he was using a basketball analogy in our conversation. And I didn't even know that it was a basketball analogy, but he said he had his A team and his B team. And so I asked him, what do you want with the A team and the B team? And the A team, it turned out there were 5 of them, because that's what happens in basketball. And so he had a visualization of 5 people on the court playing hard and 3 people sitting on the bench. So his B team was sitting on the bench. And that was fascinating because he wanted to grow his team to 24 people. But that doesn't work with a basketball analogy, because all he would have gotten with basketball would have been to have more and more people sitting on the bench and himself feeling more frustrated. So when it came to his awareness that he was having a basketball analogy, he realized that having a different analogy with a sport that has more players on the field being active would be a lot more helpful way for him to visualize his team, because then he could have a lot more people on the A team. He could have several groups of people with different skills, and they could all be working together in ways that weren't possible with basketball. So stick with the metaphors, have super fun with it. Pay attention to gestures. If somebody is literally carrying the weight of the world, you might see that in the way they hold their hands and their shoulders and their head. Just be paying attention and having fun with it. Listen to how they're using their language of spatial relationships with what they're wanting to work through. And pay attention to their symbols. Are they using plants? Are they using sports? Are they using baking? Are they using growth? Are they using war imagery? You can just have a ball with metaphor. And I hope you do, because it's going to do your clients a whole lot of good. If you would like to listen to more fun with metaphors and a whole lot of other topics, you can find me at awakencoaching.com. And I am the founder, CEO, director of training for Awaken Coach Institute. And you can get hours on all of the competencies from the ICF with my program, and I hope that you will. I would love to see you on there. I have some free courses, so please feel free to go to awakencoaching.com and find some fun new insights for yourselves. Can't wait to talk with you more. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast powered by ICF Professional Coaches. To know more about our ICF events and podcast offerings, feel free to visit our website icf-events.org.